Okay, so chapter 9 of Atonement is another really crucial one that follows directly on from what's just happened in chapter 8. Cecilia reads the letter, she understands how Robbie feels about her. Okay, so it's sort of continuing that progression really. A few bits I want to sort of draw your attention to. Firstly, the sort of second half of page 97, it describes Cecilia's wardrobe and her clothes. And we're told that, you know, the wardrobe rails are a few feet of personal history. She's got flapper dresses, so 1920 style, sort of like Great Gatsby style dresses from her sort of teenage years. And then the beginnings of shoulder pads in later dresses. So unlike her mother, Cecilia is a character who is moving with the times. She's got different fashions for sort of different eras. She's one who isn't stuck in the past. She's very, very different to her mother, Emily. Okay, and contextually, I think she represents a new kind of woman. As we get onto page 101, right towards the bottom, she's speculating on what's happened to Bryony. Remember, Bryony's gone off to sort of slash at the nettles. And Cecilia comes up with various ideas. She thinks she might be drowned in the lake, ravished by gypsies. Now, she's not being melodramatic here. What Cecilia does is she thinks, I'll imagine the worst case scenario and then it can only be better than that. But what's interesting is that it shows how all of us fundamentally think and experience life through stories. Cecilia's thinking of these horror stories, and that's how she's sort of making herself feel better and understanding the world around her. It's not just Bryony who does that, we all do it, and as readers we do it too. In Atonement we want the happy ending. Contextually, on page 102 we get a really nice exploration of that nuclear family starting to fracture and fall apart. So the nuclear family is the idea that it's a mum, a dad and whatever number of children, okay, and they stay together. What we realise on page 102 is that actually it tells us about halfway down Mr. Tallis had to work late and would stay up in town. Mr. Tallis is having an affair basically, and Emily is this very weak female role. We see the fracturing of that traditional family. Mr. Tallis is absent, he gets away, and Emily isn't strong enough to sort of maintain the family, okay? So we're seeing what the world is doing to these women in particular, but to people, and Cecilia, who can evolve with the times, is more able to sort of cope with it. About halfway down page 103, Cecilia decides that actually she needs to get out. This house isn't her, and it says about halfway down she needed an adventure. Very short, simple sentence. But again, just like Bryony, she's waiting for something to happen. Cecilia's doing the same, okay? We get the idea that these younger women need something to happen to them. They can't cope. It's this stifling heat. They need the storm to come. They need something to change. And again, maybe we shouldn't be so hard on Bryony, because actually Cecilia feels very much the same. She wants something to happen as well. She imagines what she's going to do, going to Paris. There's that idea really that she needs a new identity. She wants to go elsewhere. She says, you know, there would be other evenings like this, and to enjoy them she would have to be elsewhere. There's that idea that Cecilia is desperate for a new identity. The irony of this book being that Bryony gives her one. Bryony creates this fictional version of Cecilia to go on changing dresses, to go on altering and evolving with the times, because she doesn't let her die. On page 105, about halfway down, Cecilia has a bit of a problem. Okay, Emily's decided that they should all have a Sunday roast, or a roast dinner, sorry, it's not necessarily a Sunday. But it's stiflingly hot, okay, it's a ridiculous idea, it's a stupid decision to have. And Cecilia's, it says halfway down, the dilemma was familiar enough, how to keep the peace and not humiliate her mother. We see Cecilia taking control of the situation, we see Emily being weak. And about 5 lines from the bottom, Cecilia says to her, Emily, I know it's far too hot. She calls her by her first name. It shows that different dynamic. There's not that motherly respect for her. Cecilia's the one having to take charge here. Compare that to Hard Times, where names are important there. It's not Sissy to Mr. Gradgrind, it's girl number 20. He won't call her by her first name. Here, the fact that Cecilia calls her mother by her own first name shows that actually there's that breakdown of relationships. Cecilia's been forced to grow up and leave her child behind because she's got to take control of the family. We get something, I suppose, vaguely interesting to sort of look at on page 107, about a third of the way down. Cecilia asks, you know, she says, do you know there are girls getting all sorts of jobs now? Okay, you may well have seen the pictures from the war of sort of land girls, and the famous one with the woman sort of holding a bicep saying, we can do it. There's that idea with the war coming that actually women are able to sort of stand on their own 2 feet. And I think Cecilia represents, again, that new type of woman who can do that. When Bryony's finally found, we get a description right at the bottom of page 110. Okay, Bryony was still there, still barefoot and in a filthy white dress. So we get innocence there, don't we? Bryony's there in a white dress, she's barefoot, emphasising the childhood, the innocence. However, it's filthy, it's dirtied, and again I think that's a great little image for this childhood that has been tainted. At this point, the letter's been written, Bryony's taken it to give to Cecilia and not quite understood it. She's attacked the nettles. There's that idea of that real tainted innocence coming in. Cecilia reads the letter, and about halfway down, well, a third of the way down page 111, it says, a unit of meaning whose force and colour was derived from the single repeated word. Again, it's words that are having an effect. This is a novel that explains that. Bryony's novel has an effect. It brings these people back to life. It could bring down the marshals. Words clearly have an effect, and that's exactly what happens to Cecilia there. Just over halfway down on page 111, Cecilia starts dwelling on it. She thinks, of course, everything was explained. And there's that idea that actually there is a break from childhood there. There is a loss of innocence, but it's not actually totally negative. There's an idea that it's necessary, it's part of Cecilia growing up and evolving and not being like a mum, that actually she loses some of that childhood and some of that innocence. So it's not as simple as innocence being good here. Cecilia represents that loss of innocence being much more positive, as a way of breaking away from the history, from the tradition, from the dangers of becoming like a mum. And then right at the end of the chapter on page 112, about 5 lines from the bottom, we get Cecilia. It says she confronted Paul Marshall. That word confronted, again, just like refugees, just like civil war from earlier, it's a warlike reference, isn't it? She confronted Paul Marshall. He is there, he is a threat, he is something to be fought, he is a danger. And after all that positive growing up, he is there as this real threatening figure. He passes at this cocktail, okay? Again, it's boiling hot. They don't want this really cloying, chocolatey cocktail. It's described as being viscous and brown, so it's cloying, it's almost like oil around them. Again, it's stifling heat, remember, and the viscous brown drink is another sign of that. It's something that traps them. And then the last words of the chapter is what he says to her, I insist you try it. He insists, okay? He's literally forcing something upon her. Okay, it's a much less positive version of leaving innocence behind. Okay, when we know that Bryony has told this story later on, it could be that Bryony's deliberately setting him up as the antithesis, in other words, the opposite of Robbie. Robbie represents, loss of innocence in a much more positive way. Paul Marshall, just like these villains in these gothic stories, is the enemy of this medical prince that is in Trials of Arabella. He's the dangerous one, and he's insisting, he's forcing her, he's trapping her. Just like in Trials of Arabella, Arabella has to escape to the seaside because she is trapped by a man. So that is chapter 9.